pick up your switching. Go right to a couple of things. I've been very fortunate since I moved here to Michigan. I've met a number of people. Some of them are on these calls, and they've they've helped me learn a lot about railroading and how the real railroads worked. And I've had a chance to operate on some very good layouts and learned quite a bit in the process. So I wanted to talk about how switching is often done on layouts and some ways to perhaps improve that for some more fun along the way. So we're going to talk about a couple of industries, model railroad industries, Dubuque wholesale grocers on my layout, Primo from Dave Fodness's layout. Dave talked about his layout a couple of months ago. And then a couple of industries from another friend of mine, Bruce Berta. We're going to talk about custom plastic, online packaging, and Purina Foods. What I wanted to look at here, and I'm going to pick on my own layout. This is an unfinished portion of my layout up in Rockford. And you can see in the picture, I hope, three little stub sidings. Just about long enough for a couple of cars and not much more. I think that's common on a lot of layouts, and maybe it's a vestige from the days when we were all working on 4x8 sheets of plywood. Our real estate was pretty limited, so we couldn't afford much more than a car length or two for a switch siding. So I see that as a common solution on a lot of railroads, but the real customers very often have much more involved switching requirements in order to get cars properly spotted. I'm not really trying to create switching puzzles here, but I am trying to emulate situations that are found on real customers. So that's what we'll try to look at. I think some of that switching can be a lot of fun. I certainly enjoy it. So we'll start with Dubuque Wholesale Grocers on my layout. They're located in Dubuque, Iowa. You can see the building in the background here, and this is actually set up for the switching problem that we're going to solve tonight. Dubuque Wholesale Grocers receives frozen foods, refrigerated produce, and non-refrigerated goods, and they typically distribute to local independent grocers. So they serve some of those people, receive a lot of stuff by rail. And here we see the outline of the problem for tonight. I see 3 cars already spotted at the warehouse. Down here on the, can you see my mouse movement?
Yep.
Okay. I have one car that's parked on the lead. It hasn't been switched in. We'll come back to that one in a minute. And then with the engine, I've got 2 new cars that we're going to bring in tonight. So we're going to deal with 6 cars tonight. The rules for very often what I've seen on some layouts, simplified switching, I've got 3 cars spotted in here. And I've been on some layouts where the switching solution would be to take these 3 new cars, basically shove them in on top of the first 3, shove those down a little bit, and you've got 6 cars spotted at 6 doors. Everybody's happy, right? Well, not really so much. The rules for this grocer are the doors 1 and 2. We're starting over here on the right-hand side and working toward the back. Doors 1 and 2 are for non-refrigerated goods. 3 and 4 are for refrigerated. 5 and 6 are for frozen. Okay. Between the warehouse and the railroad, we've negotiated one other rule too, because this is a busy warehouse. There's a lot of cars that can come in. So we've established a rule that a car can be offset by 1 door from its designated area. So refrigerated cars can actually go to 2, 3, 4, or 5. Non-refrigerated can go to 1, 2, or 3. And frozen can go to 4, 5, and 6. Everybody following so far?
And is that an off spot then?
The
Considered
car
off spot?
next to the end, yeah, the car on the lead into the warehouse is an off spot. Normally that wouldn't be there. They would try to switch those cars in fairly quickly. But as it happens, in order to get this car in, they would have to move everything there, and they knew some more cars were coming. This car's only been here for a couple of hours. It came in on a train just a couple of hours ago. They knew some more cars were coming on the next one through, so they decided to wait, and they're going to do the switch job now for the full warehouse. Okay. So let's look at the cars that were parked that we saw. USLX car is a Tropicana juice car. And I see from the card in the building here that this car has finished its work. It's unloaded and it's on the home route side, and it's ready to be picked up to go back to Florida for another load of juice. The UPFE and the CNW cars are in the middle of unloading. They have refrigerated produce. Both cars came in from California, and they're in the process of unloading. And of course, the CNW car is taking advantage of that one car offset. It's parked at door 2. Okay. The cars that we have to deal with, the first car, and I'm sorry for that reverse order on this one, PFE 458103 is actually this car that was off spotted up here in the upper right. And it has produce, actually some grapes that have come in from Michigan, and it's refrigerated, so it's going to have to be spotted at one of the refrigerated doors. Boston, Maine, carload of canned food. My first thought looking at that car with Boston and Maine, that's probably a carload of either clam chowder or baked beans. Then I looked at the waybill a little bit more closely. Whoops, that's Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. So I have to conclude that the baked beans or the clam chowder probably went out to the West Coast, and it managed to pick up a backhaul on the way back, so it didn't come back east all the way empty. So we've got some Western canned food of some kind, and it's going to be unloaded. And from the waybill, it's going to go to door between doors 1 and 3. And the last car on here, and if Ron Christensen were on the call, he would chew me out, I know, because he says, and I agree, PFE cars weren't used for frozen meat, but nevertheless, I've got a waybill.
Out of their fleet, they had about 300 cars that were meat reefers. So it's possible.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I've got an answer now.
I don't think they were 50-foot freezer, but
well, yeah, and yes, this probably should be more of a meat reefer, but my explanation is that Western Foods was kind of stuck. They had a load that had to come to Dubuque, and they couldn't find a reefer offhand, so they commandeered a PFE car for this particular load. Well, that's my story.
Yeah, you got pallets of frozen meat, so you just need a car that can handle the freezer temp.
Exactly.
That's what you got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
you don't need a meat reefer for that load.
Right. This is all packaged meat, so it's a clean load, and it's coming in that way. So point with this car, though, is it's going to have to go to doors 5 or 6. It's going to have to go down to the end. Could go to 4, but it's properly spotted at 5 or 6. So those are the 3 cars that are coming in that we're going to have to deal with. And that Tropicana car we mentioned, that one can be picked up and taken back to the yard. So that's our job for today.
Before you move on, how did you know that the one was empty from the waybill?
Oh,
I'm just curious. Where on the waybill does it say it's an empty car?
It says home route card up here.
Okay,
so this is
I got it.
Just the back side of it, and it's going back. It's going to Bradenton, Florida. So It's,
Okay.
it came in with orange juice. I know from that it's, from those two things that it's empty,
Right.
but
It's
mostly
one
from
of
the
those-
home.
It's one of
I
those
missed
things
the
the crew
fact.
would just automatically know.
Yeah, mostly from the, home route on the way bill. Okay?
Yep, thank you.
All right, so to go ahead and do this move, the first thing that we're gonna do is leave our two new cars, the Boston and Maine and the Meat. We're gonna leave those out on the main here for just a minute, and we're gonna go in and pull the full string from the siding. Then using that string as a handle, we're gonna grab the reefer, the meat reefer, and set it on our lead as the first car that's gonna go in. It's gonna have to go into, in here first. Now I can take what's left, including the Tropicana, the UPFE and CNW, the hold cars, plus the off spot. And I'm gonna move them back over to the main. And then I'm gonna take my off spot, which is closest to the engine, I'm gonna shove it into the siding. It's gonna replace the Tropicana car at door 4. So the next two in after that will be the UPFE and the CNW cars. They're going back to doors 3 and 2 where they were. And now I can worry about my B&M car and put in on the end of the string, and we'll set it up for door 1. So now I have everything lined up for the final spotting. I can shove the entire string down, spot the cars at the door, and my Tropicana car is still coupled to the engine, and I can take it back to the yard. One thing I'll mention here is that I took the meat reefer. Notice I shoved it all the way down to door 6. I left door 5 open. Why would I do that? Well, I might have another car come in that would be a frozen food car that I could then spot in at door 5 without bothering the meat at door 6. That car at door 6 is there. It's not going to have to move until it's unloaded and ready to be pulled back out.
Question.
So yes, that's something I would do with any of these. I'd try to shove them in as far as I could so that there's less likelihood that they're going to have to be moved in the interim before they're ready. Now,
Question.
go ahead.
Do you do anything to blue flag the cars that are, you pulled some cars out and put them back? Do you have anything for timing for how long it takes to unload, or do you blue flag them where they can't be moved while they're being unloaded, or?
Well, sometimes they need to be moved as we're doing in this session because just because there's a car that's going to have to go further down the line. I don't really blue flag these cars. What would happen, the switch crew would come in. They would probably talk with somebody in the warehouse and say, this is what we've got. We're going to have to move a couple of cars. These are not hazardous materials, so it's not really a hazard situation. It's more just the inconvenience of interrupting the unloading process.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That IC switcher that I showed a couple of minutes ago is an Intermountain Jeep 10 with Lokesound V5 decoder. I have the momentum set up almost to full momentum, and it's one of my favorite engines. It runs beautifully, and in working through this problem, I had just a ball working it back and forth, moving the throttle to get it into motion, and then mostly letting it coast into position and then hitting brake. I have a Digitrax system. Button 6 is the brake on mine, so I can use that without having to go to a shift key, and just kind of toggling back and forth between the throttle and the brake, and letting the engine coast into a position to make joints, was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing these kinds of jobs when I get a chance to go down and play with it myself. And I didn't actually time it, but as I recall, I think it took about 30 minutes to go through these moves. So it does take some time if you've got the momentum, but I but I find it very enjoyable to go through it. Comments or questions?
Any
Okay,
of these
let's
going to
move.
be on fast clock operation?
It is. I do a fast clock. I do 1.6 to 1.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have space, that siding for the warehouse, I measured it the other day. It's very close to 8 feet from the switch point to the stop at the end. If you don't have that much room for a 6-door warehouse, you might try it with 3 doors or even 2. Clark, in your era, I think the alternative to this would be to have a single or double-sided, double-ended siding in a small town with, any combination of several different businesses on it. And you'd have very much the same kind of situation where you have to shove in cars in a particular order and place them, exactly where they need to be for unloading. If you've got a double-ended siding in your town, you probably would get away with switching each end of the siding, basically divide it in half, switch one end, then do the runaround, go to the other end and switch it. But the whole idea here is to force some sorting of the cars and movement of the cars within the area that you're switching before everything can get spotted again. So it's not just a matter of shoving a car in or pulling a car out and shoving a new one in where the other one was. Okay. Next one, let's look at Cremo. And this is on Dave Fodness's layout. I think he mentioned it briefly when he did the layout tour a few weeks ago. This is a bakery, and it receives only. The finished goods go out by truck. And there are 3 tracks in here. I'll try and get my mouse back here. I'll talk about the tracks in just a second, but I do want to mention there's a fairly long lead into Cremo. It goes outside the picture to the right. So there is room on the lead in order to shuffle cars around and move them around without taking up a lot of space on the main line. You can actually go in and do that. So let's look at what we have at Cremo. Track 1 is the track in the back with the hoppers. And there are actually 3 spots inside the building. So the first spot, the deepest spot in the building would be a covered hopper with grain, usually wheat. Next one would be sugar that comes in an air slide. And the one closest to the door is flour that comes in a flexi-flow hopper. This Dave's modeling the South Bend area, so he gets flour via the New York Central and some of their flexi-flow cars. The track in the middle here is packaging material that comes in by boxcar. And then the track nearest is reserved for tank cars, and it's got spots for 2 different kinds of cars. Vegetable oil comes in first. That's the black tank car in the back. And the 2 cars in front of that are corn syrup cars. So I've got a variety of different products coming in. I've got exact or precise spots for each one. And as this is set up at the moment, I see that I've got a Chicago Northwestern air slide in here, so that's sugar by definition. And presumably there's a sugar car inside the building. So if I look at the switching activity for this, I find that I'm going to have a number of moves here to make. And one of the differences between model railroading and real life is that the switch crew could walk into the building and figure out whether there's a grain car in there or not, and whether these cars are coupled together inside the building. Model railroaders don't really have that luxury, and in order to be able to get them in and out, I have to shove them into the building as coupled cars. So the first move I would make here would be to pull the cars out, all four of the cars, presumably there are 4 cars. I'd pull all 4 of them out of the building, uncouple the sugar car from the grain car, pull that string out, then shove the air slide and the FlexiFlow onto one of these other tracks, take the new air slide and shove it in, and I'd park it just on the lead for the building. And then I would go back, leaving the old air slide, grab the FlexiFlow and shove it on top, so that FlexiFlow and the Northwestern air slide would have just switched position. Now I can take and shove all 3 of those cars back in the building and take my empty air slide and move it over to the yard. I don't know at this point whether I've got cars for any box cars or tank cars, but it would be a similar kind of process to move those around. So again, I've got a number of moves that I might have to make in order to switch that building. Cremo replaced these 2 buildings that Dave had on his layout earlier, Rayco and Armco. And you can see here for Rayco, there were siding with spots for 2 box cars. Rayco had a spot for 1 gondola and the hoist to unload material from that gondola. So what he had before was spots for 3 cars. Now I've got spots for at least 7, and compare the difference in switching value, if you will. Comments, questions? Okay. Here's a different situation. This is custom plastics on Bruce Berta's layout. And in this view, we're looking at the end of the facility, the railroad end, the business end from our point of view. It's a plastics molding facility, and it receives plastic pellets in 4-bay covered hoppers. So this is a fairly modern facility, and it ships molded product out mostly by truck. And again, all I'm seeing at this point is the end of the facility. So the picture on the right shows a little more detail of the railroad end of the building. I have 2 tracks in here all the way back by the tanks. I've got spots for a total of 6 cars, 3 on each track. And from a switching point of view, the job is to put very specific cars at very specific locations. Since these cars all look pretty much alike, they're all gray, light gray, mostly light gray, 4-bay covered hoppers. The only thing that really tells that differentiates them is the reporting marks on the car. So you have to look very closely at the reporting marks in order to get the right cars in the right place. And typically,
And numbers.
they have the numbers. Yep.
You have to use numbers, I would think, too.
You absolutely have to look at the reporting marks on the car and then match them up with the individual spots, spots 1 through 6. In a session, he typically will bring in anywhere from 1 to 3 new cars. He may have 1 to 3 new spots and 1 to 3, I'm sorry, 1 to 3 pickups and 1 to 3 new cars and then the spots. I neglected to mention in the picture on the right here, I see 1 off-spot car that's waiting to be spotted. I have the road in between. I've got room for, and the picture on the left, I've got room for 4 more off spots in here. And it is possible that I may have a new car come in today that needs to be spotted today. And if that's the case, then I've got to dig all the way in through all this mess, pull everything out, and then shove the new car into the right position and then start moving things back into place again. So it becomes very interesting. As it turns out, I had the opportunity to work this last night and just Tuesday night, and had just a ball doing the switching on that. It's this job can easily take 30 to 40 minutes of moving cars around. Don't have a lot of room. Don't have a lot of extra room to move cars. And again, trying to match up the car numbers to the exact space that it has to go is kind of an interesting challenge. Let me ask you to look a little bit at the picture on the left a little bit. This is a little broader view. This is the one end of Bruce's layout. It's a peninsula. It's less than 2 feet wide. It's probably 12 to 14 feet long. I have custom plastics down here at one end. Next to it, you can barely see it in the picture. I've got a little coal dealer on the end of a spur that takes in 1 car. I have 3 reefers parked in front of handsome coal storage. The tan building is not rail served. And in just a second, I'll show you the online packaging, which is to the left of this picture. We'll see it. But here on one peninsula, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rail served industries, and I can easily spend over an hour just switching these 4 buildings using the low speeds and momentum and braking. And I had a blast doing that. It was just a lot of fun. Here's the prototype for customs plastic. This is called Brunk Plastic. It's in Goshen, Indiana. This is a aerial view from Google. And up here where the mouse is, you can see the spots that they have. They have roughly 10 spots back here on theirs. They've got another 15 cars in the off spot position that are available to move in. And if I follow the curve around, these are the siding tracks for Brunk. And it's not included in the picture, but if I go off the bottom of that picture, the aerial view shows about 30 covered hoppers down there that are stored and available for use if they need to. This is nearly a full-time job for an NS engine working in Goshen. They have a lot of work to do when they come in and work it. Comments?
Nope.
Yeah.
It looks like there was a curved track in the center that was eliminated.
There was a curved
I point right there.
I think
right
that's a
here.
road.
Is that just a
That's
road?
there's a street that goes through there. I've been down that street, and it's a little intimidating when you go through here because those covered hoppers are right next to the street. And if you're in a car going through there, it's just a little bit intimidating to go through there. But if there's switching going on, there will be a brakeman in the street monitoring the traffic.
I used to work for the Wisconsin Central in the Fox River Valley in Kaukauna, and we'd switch a paper mill. It had the same flavor as this, but
Yep.
the switching was done on a hill, on an incline,
Ooh.
which had some real, like, get me out of here.
I would imagine it was fun putting the loaded cars in, right?
And then plus the fact at the end, we had to we had to drop a car onto another track. So you had to ride the brake down, and every so often the brakes didn't want to grab right away. And it was like, question, do I jump or sacrifice my life for this? Oh, it's unbelievable.
Pretty cheap throw ride, huh?
No, it was terrible.
Okay.
And it was like that all night, like drop one.
Oh, yeah, switching at night would be even more fun.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Look at online packaging, which is the last one on this end of the railroad. And they make plastic packaging material, so bottles and jars of things. They also receive the plastic pellet covered hoppers. So now, in addition to what I have to worry about at custom plastics, I again have to look at these card numbers very carefully, because some of them wind up coming over here to online packaging as well. And he's got room for track 1 takes a couple of 4-bay plastic pellet hoppers. Track 2 takes a couple of chlorine tank cars. And as I mentioned before, these 4-bay plastic covered hoppers all look pretty much alike. So it's really important to pay attention to the numbers.
They ever chalk them up? I mean, not on the model, but do they ever, put chalk marks on there so they kind of keep track of where you're going? Because
I'm sorry, the chalk marks where?
on the card, just to remember, so you don't forget which card went where. And once in a while, I'd make a chalk mark, like
Yep.
a number, like a spot number.
In real life, yeah, in real life you could do that. Bruce gets upset if I go down there with a stick of chalk and start marking up his cars. So
If I may, for what it's worth, I've operated on a railroad where they did chalk marks via a tag. They placed it was a small rectangular piece, and it would go over the running board on top of a car.
sure.
I have worked on a model railroad. That's how they did the chalk mark, was via that type of a plastic piece over the you place it on.
I used to
On,
have some of those too, but I forgot what the purpose was for them, so we quit using them.
on Bruce's, we work off of a switch list. So as you make the moves, you kind of check off the switch list and use that to kind of keep track of where you are. As I said, he's not very pleased if I come in with a stick of chalk. So.
I would say not.
Okay. The last one on here is Purina Feed Mill. And it both manufactures and redistributes animal feed. And we tend to think of 1 or 2 car types, box cars and covered hoppers, when we think of the feed mills. But in this case, he's got the tank cars that come in as well. So he gets different grains and dried distillers grains for the feed. Tank cars on his bring in beef tallow for mixing.
Yep.
And then the far end, there are a couple of spots for box cars for shipping the bagged feed when he's ready to go. This is the same mill from the other side. And again, I've got spots for 2 box cars down here, 1 tank car, and one covered hopper is unloaded, but very often you'll find one or two additional covered hoppers that are off spot and ready to be used at the next session or spotted in the next session. Sometimes during the session, we'll bring in a brand new covered hopper and spot it and leave the off spots where they are. So it's not always the case that you switch the spotted car for one of the existing off spots. Again, you have to kind of look at the workflow and figure out what needs to be done. But again, these are examples of they're prototypical examples. They are representative of real businesses and illustrate the point that very often you have a lot of switching to do in order to get the cars into the right spot where they need to be. So my point is that switching a single industry can be highly variable from session to session. In the case of my produce or my grocer distributor, it's a different problem every day. I may bring in 1 or 2 cars, or I may bring in 6 cars if I need to. But it's a similar problem, but it's a different problem every time I try to do it. And the fun of doing that, particularly with a slow moving engine and using the braking, I just find that to be very satisfying. And that's the presentation. Thanks.
Very nice.
Yeah, nice job, Bob. Thank you very much.
Brings back a lot of memories.
Bob, do you do any operating sessions on layouts that use Katie coupler magnets and the delayed action feature for the couplers?
I have worked on those. I don't really like the magnets that well.
Agree.
The reason is because they often work when I'm not ready for them to work, when I've got the wrong car spotted on them. And very often when I do have the right car spotted, I don't have it spotted in exactly the right spot, so they don't work when they need to. I'm just as happy using a pick to couple and uncouple. And of course, the key is that you got to be able to do the switching. You've got to be able to reach the spot to do the coupling and uncoupling. I do use the delayed feature a lot in terms of positioning. So I may delay the couplers and then shove down into the track till I get to the right spot, and then just reverse direction and pull away. And that usually works pretty well. So I'm not really a big fan of the magnets.
Agree.
The only layout
The reason I ask is I've been with some operators who are fairly brutal with their coupler picks and kind of remove the coupler entirely, therefore make the whole thing.
Yes, I understand that point. That's a fair point.
On my operating railroad, I don't have problems with couplers, but coupler springs, if you use, we use, of course, the picks you use, or the swizzle sticks. Some guys call them telephone poles. But anyway, if you use them, I have one operator that has a tendency to eliminate the coupler spring quite a bit on the KDs. So I replace those on and off.
You see
The
that
challenge
happening
to
with
me,
the number 5s, but
Yeah,
with the smaller couplers, the springs don't seem to get knocked out.
Yeah. The challenge for me using the swizzle sticks right now is more that getting more gray hair every day, and it gets harder and harder to see in there to figure out exactly where to place the pick. So that becomes an issue.
I also have one gentleman who can't use them, so we have to use that's why on my railroad, I have to leave. A lot of guys cut the KD trip pin off. I
Yep.
cannot do that because he has to use a hook to be able to uncouple cars. He can't
Right.
use this whistle stick, so I cannot cut the trip pins off.
Yep. Bruce and Dave both have cut the trip pins off of theirs. They don't use them more for the appearance that it's not really, it's only a fair representation of the air hose. So they decided to cut them off, and all they have available to use is the pick. So
I've operated on one layout that did use magnets, but he had them the under benchwork magnet that was on a hinge, and he had a stick where you
Yeah.
pushed it in, it would pop the magnet up in place. You pull it out, it dropped the magnet to avoid
Yeah.
some of the issues that you were experiencing, Bob. And it
Right.
worked fairly well, but in other places on that layout, you used to pick because he only had magnets in certain locations that could not be reached easily.
right. Yep.
Jeff Otto.
Oh,
Yep, Jeff
Jeff would
Otto is
allow
the
you to
man.
use a pick.
It's
Yep.
Jeff's
Yeah.
Auto Railroad that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yep.
that, I don't think he would let you take a pick in this basement.
Well, he
That could
calls them
be.
the telephone poles.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
you can't be reaching onto the railroad.
No.
Not
Bob,
allowed.
Bob, I was going to ask you, I noticed on one of those photos, either the first or second, you were saying there were switch lists used, yet I saw boxes that it looks like for car cards at one point. Were there car cards or were those there for other purposes on the file sheet?
Yeah, let me can I go backwards here? I don't know if I can go backwards. Nope, I'm out of that presentation. Let me bring it up
I'm just
again.
saying, one of them had, you said switch list you were using, but I noticed there were pockets for car cards.
I think there was different railroads, right?
Yeah, they were different railroads. Actually, Bruce was using car cards, and the photos that I have were taken when he was still using the car cards. In fact, Tuesday night was the first time over there that I actually worked from a switch list on his, and we've had a lot of discussions about whether using a car cards or a switch list is the better answer. On a railroad like these, particularly Dave's and Bruce's, a car is only going to move once during a session. So switch list is, in my mind, is a perfect solution for that environment. On my railroad, I may move a car 2 or 3 times before it gets placed in a session. I may bring it into one of the main yards by road train. And if the crew gets it moved to where it can be placed in the way freight or the local switcher and then placed in position, that's 2 moves. And I find that using the car cards is easier if you've got the multiple, if a car moves multiple times during a session. It's a little bit easier to keep track of. The hard part is, well, how does the car get routed? I think using a car cards makes more sense if the car is going to move more than once during a session. Bruce's and Dave's layouts are both switching layouts. We kind of start with a yard full of cars or a string of cars that's been brought into the local railroad to be set out. The car is only going to get moved to its destination during a session, and that'll only be one move. So in that case, I think the switch list is a fine solution. Thank you.
All right, nice
Thank
job,
you.
Bob. Next week, we have Ken Huff presenting on his Pensy boxcars, right, Ken? Ken's muted. All right, well, we'll hope that Ken heard that and is ready to go. And then on the 29th, we'll have Jason Clockey again, and Jason is going to give a presentation that he gave at Naperville on the Oil City Rochester section of his layout, which is the last section that he finished. It's a great presentation, so we look forward to that. And after that, we have a couple of things that we've kind of had percolating. We may do a panel on boxcar, freight cars, and then there's the presentation on trees by Ron, and Mitch that we're hoping to do one of these days as soon as we get a microphone on Mitch's computer. I see Ken is with us now. So Ken, you're up for next week, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
All right, excellent. So lots of fun to be had, and appreciate everybody coming tonight. And thanks again, Bob. Really enjoyed your presentation. Well done. And we'll see you guys all next week.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
See ya.